and I'm going to say welcome again and introduce Cynthia, who I think most of you know. Oh, great, Rosalia can hear us. So Cynthia Bampton is the co-founder of the Awaken Life Project with her husband, Peter. The project is based in Portugal, but has members all over the world, and is really dedicated to helping people awaken to the reality that they are always already free. Cynthia runs courses and retreats throughout the year here in Portugal and also abroad, and is a teacher and mentor to dozens of people all over the world. With that, I'll hand you over to Cynthia.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to see so many people. It's good to see your faces again after the August holidays. So let's just start, as we always do, with a bit of a meditation. So if everybody could sit up and sit up straight and make yourselves comfortable. And close your eyes. And take a deep breath in through your nose, all the way down into your belly. And as you exhale, relax any tension that you might be feeling. And just do this at your own pace for a few minutes. And as you breathe, feel the breath enlivening your body. And feel the breath relaxing the body at the same time. And just take a moment to appreciate the body breathing. When you're ready, just breathe normally, relaxing your shoulders. And your arms and your legs. And be aware in this moment that you are aware of the body breathing. You are aware of any sounds you might be hearing, any thoughts that might be arising. And recognize that you're witnessing thousands of things arising in your awareness. From the background noise to something that's more in the forefront. But recognize that you are aware of these sensations. You are aware of the mind moving, and the dogs barking. You might be even aware of your body sitting. You might feel that you're even outside of the body. You might be aware that you're contracted. Or you might be aware that you're deeply relaxed. So realize the content of your awareness at this moment is not important. The important thing is that you recognize that you are aware that content is arising in your awareness. It doesn't matter if you notice a quiet mind. It doesn't matter if you notice a busy mind. It doesn't matter if the body is deeply relaxed or if you have pain. Everything that's arising within your awareness is just another object arising. So the thought that says that you're a fantastic meditator, or the thought that says that you're a terrible meditator, are completely equal, and they are just objects arising in your awareness. So you can just relax and rest as awareness itself. So see if you can shift and relax into that which is aware and not be so interested and fixated on any thought or sensation that is arising. Our habit is to be fixated on objects. Our habit is to identify with thought, with feeling, believing that we are limited and separate, when actually the truth is we are always that which is aware. And none of the content that is arising in your experience right now means anything about you as awareness itself. So allow yourself to rest as awareness itself. And if you notice that you feel contracted or your mind is very busy, don't draw the conclusion that that means anything about you. It's just another object arising in your awareness. So you can rest. You don't need to fight. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to manipulate your experience in any way. Because anything that's arising in your awareness means absolutely nothing about you as a separate self. It's just all stuff. So if you find yourself wandering with thought or being fixated on pain, and you are aware that you are wandering, and you are aware that there is pain, then you have to question, are you the pain? Are you the wandering mind? Or are you much more than that? Are you that which is aware? So if you're in bliss right now, or if you're contracted, and even if you're making a problem about your internal experience, just recognize that you are that which is aware and not the movement of thought or feeling. So for the last minute or so of the meditation, bring your attention back to the breath. And this time take a deep breath in and appreciate the sensation of the body being breathed. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. So I'm surprising myself a little bit tonight because I was completely exhausted. There's been a lot going on, and you know, and the voice in my mind can continuously tell me, oh my God, you're so tired. And I thought, well, do I really have to listen to that voice? How do I know how tired I am? And I would just kind of laugh at this voice. And yeah, you know, maybe the body's flying a little bit low, but the spirit is flying high. So where am I going to put my attention? And the beautiful thing is I can be aware that the body is flying low. I don't have to deny it. And at the same time, completely embrace that I'm flying high. So I'm going to talk about ego tonight. And so what I just said has everything to do with our relationship to asking ourselves the question, is ego actually real? Okay, because we basically assume quite a lot of things about ourselves. We assume that we're limited. We assume that because we have a thought that tells us we're afraid, we assume that we're afraid. We assume that we can do something, and we assume we can't do other things. We assume that we can't sit still in meditation because the body is agitated or the mind is busy. We assume that if there's a contraction, if we're feeling contracted and we're feeling unhappy, then therefore there's a problem that shouldn't be happening, and we assume that we have to fight and change our experience. So all of this movement of assumption is basically one way that you could look at ego. So we have a very, very simple definition of ego. And many of you on this call, I know quite a lot of you, and it's great to see a lot of you that were just on the 10-day retreat. It's great to see Alexandra, who was on the women's retreat in the spring. It's great to see a few clinic people. You see, but what we end up doing is we assume that we are isolated, separate, and limited. And that's our definition of ego. It's like it's our belief that we're separate and we're limited. So most of the time, so a lot of you have been on, I think almost everybody's been on a webinar or something, or a call, or a retreat. So let's just kind of cut to the chase a little bit here. Because a lot of you have had experience, almost everybody on this call has had experience of going beyond the mind and going beyond limitation and separation. And so sometimes that will happen in a meditation, sometimes it happens walking in nature, sometimes it happens when you're making love, whatever. But all of a sudden, the doors of perception open. And maybe when the doors were closed, maybe you were completely contracted, you thought you had all these problems, or you thought you were a super important person, or you thought you were a really horrible person. You had all these ideas about yourself and everybody else. You think you got a big problem, you know, and you're just like, ugh, completely victimized by everything that's actually happening in a given moment. And then for whatever reason, you get to the point where you can't stand your suffering anymore, or by the grace of God, the doors of perception open. And then what happens? In that moment, everything that you thought was wrong disappears. Everything you thought about yourself disappears. Everything you thought about everybody else disappears. In fact, you actually disappear. So I know a lot of you on the call, and I know a lot of you have had this experience before. And I know a lot of you have had it more than once, or twice, or 10 times, okay? So it's not about chasing another experience to find out if ego is real. Because if you've recognized in your own experience, through your own, you know, in your own body mind, and you've seen those doors of perception open, and you're like, oh my God, there's something so much brighter and bigger and amazing that's actually going on here. And when I put my attention on all of the stuff that's going on in my head, it's like I feel like I'm cut off from those things. I feel like I'm cut off from life itself. So, but when the doors of perception open, either through, you know, grace, or through your own intention, your own effort, your own surrender, you see, all of that disappears. So if it disappears, if it's there one moment and you're completely convinced it's real, and in the next moment it disappears, then again, you have to ask yourself, well, how real was it? Not even how real was it, but how real is it? So ego is basically something that what it is it's when we identify and we personalize a thought or we personalize a feeling. So I'll just give a very simple example. A thought arises, and it's a thought that says, I'm doing it wrong. Okay? You personalize that thought. You make it mean something about you. You create a story named Cynthia, the one that's not doing it right. Then you have something to get over. You have something to prove to everybody. You have something to do. And you're very, very busy just piling on more chapters of your own story. And so your identity as a separate I is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Your story is turning in from like a small little, maybe children's book, and it turns into, a big novel. And then it turns into a trilogy. And then all of a sudden you've got this whole story that's all about you. You've got your time in your life when, you were really upset because your first boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you when you were in high school and you were devastated. And then you've got another story when you lost your job. You got another story, when you were afraid and you didn't do something you really wanted to do and you felt weak and pathetic and you felt bad about that. And you've got that as the weak and pathetic chapter. And then you got a chapter about something else. You've got a chapter about where you made a mistake. I mean, if you look at your own story, it's just chapter after chapter of limitation, and it's chapter after chapter of being convinced that you're separate, isolated, and alone. Which basically separate, isolated, and alone means victimized. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the meditation. The meditation is basically saying, you are that which is aware. Okay, so a thought arises that said, I did it wrong. What if you just didn't make that thought mean anything about you? What if you just had that thought arise and you didn't personalize or identify with that thought? Let's say it just rose and it went away, and it rose and it went away. And you didn't actually engage with it. You didn't make it important. You didn't deny that it was there because the thought was there, but then it disappeared. So really, if you want to liberate yourself and you want to stop suffering, then the relationship you have with thought and feeling is everything. Because it's the attachment and the personalization of thought that actually creates the illusion of ego. And when the illusion of ego is arising in your experience and you personalize it, in that moment, you think it's real. You think it's real. You're convinced it's real. You're convinced you have a problem. You're convinced that you're not always already free from all of it. So when I say always already free, I can go back to the meditation. I could say when you actually recognize that you are that which is aware, and you are not the objects that's arising in your awareness, and you just rest as awareness itself. You see, you're resting in something that is prior to or before anything that's arising in your experience. And that which is prior to or before anything that's arising in this relative world is who you actually are. It's never been wounded or traumatized, and it's always already free. And again, if you go back to your own experience and you realize when the doors of perception open, what do you recognize in that moment? What is your deepest understanding? And the answer basically is, with different, maybe different variations, is you recognize that you don't exist as a separate self. You don't have a big problem to get over. And that actually there's pure happiness, deep relaxation is your natural state. How do I know? Because that's what happens when the doors of perception open. Everything that's unreal drops away, and everything that's real is right there waiting for you to recognize it. And then what happens, you know, when you're on a retreat? We had this amazing retreat, this 10-day retreat here, and everybody was resting very deeply in this. And I hope, for those of you that were on the retreat, I hope that you still are. And I'm sure there's been times where you personalized thought and feeling, and you thought that you probably lost that natural state, like it went somewhere, because all of a sudden you weren't feeling as joyful and happy and deeply relaxed as you were when you were on the retreat. But the freedom is here and now. It doesn't matter if you're deeply relaxed. It doesn't matter what you feel like. If you put your attention on what you perceive to be a problem, you are not going to recognize that your natural state is always deeply relaxed, free, and happy. But that doesn't mean that your natural state isn't always the case. It just means that you've decided to personalize a thought and a feeling. So I want to throw one other thing in about this, because this always kind of blows my mind when I think about it. And some of you have heard me say it before. But I've recognized over the years in my own path, and also in being, you know, a teacher and working with a lot of people, for most of us, we have to hear things more than once. We have to hear things sometimes 1,000 times. And what does that tell us? It tells us how completely conditioned we are to believe that we're not always, you know, free. We're not always deeply happy. So what does that tell us? It tells us most of the time we're believing that ego is real. Even though we know through our own experience, when the doors of perception open, that ego is not real because it disappeared. So what I was going to say is, we personalize thought so often, but I want you to just think about it for a moment and just think about, what is a thought? Okay, what is it? Is it a thing? Is it square? Is it round? Is it purple? Is it green? Is it soft? Is it hard? It's like, what is a thought? I mean, if you think about it, you kind of end up with a smile on your face because you realize you don't know. Like, what is it? So the beautiful part about this little exercise, there's two parts to it. One is you recognize, you go, yeah, what is a thought? I never actually thought about that. I just assumed I knew what a thought was, and I assumed that they were really important, and I also assumed they meant everything about me. So that was my big assumption. But what is it? And then you get to the point where you go, well, I actually don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. And then the doors of perception open, and all you can do is smile and just go, wow. And it's in that moment you recognize not knowing is freedom. And you also can recognize the flip side of that, of already knowing everything and assuming that you know what everything is a movement away from that freedom. Okay, so sometimes we have to really be willing to look in our own experience and just go, well, what's going on here? So if you think about it, and if you got to the point where you asked yourself in this webinar, when I was just saying that, what is a thought? And you kind of, your brain kind of stopped for a moment and you're going, wow, I actually don't know. Okay, so if you've gotten to the point you're kind of a little bit in awe of the fact that you don't know, then ask yourself, why is it that you make a thought so important? You make all your decisions about who you are from a thought that you don't even know what a thought is. So this actually is just something we need to become aware of, because otherwise we're going to constantly believe that whatever thought is arising out of our head, it means something about a separate I, and that is the birth of ego. That's the birth of you believing that ego is real. And as long as you believe it, you're going to suffer. And I think if you look at your own experience, when you contract around a thought and all of a sudden you have an identity or you're ashamed of something, you are someone. You are the person who's ashamed. You are the person who, isn't doing it right. You're the person who's fantastic. You're the best or you're the worst. It doesn't really matter what identity that you have. But whatever identity you have, whatever story you're carrying around with you, you're going to be looking at everything that happens to you in this life through the filter of that story. And then you're going to project onto other people. You're going to insist that you're separate. You're going to insist that people are either out to get you or they don't recognize how fantastic you are. There's a neediness in all of us when we're identified with ego. So I'm kind of just throwing stuff out to you right now. So we can go into the question and answer session, but I think what I'm really trying to do just in this talk is to get you to recognize that just because you believe something is real doesn't make it so. And also for you to recognize that if you have personalized thought and feeling over and over and over and over again, which all of you have, including me, if you've done that, your assumption is that you are what you think. You are what you feel. Your natural assumption as a conditioned human being is not, I am that which is aware. It is, I am that what I think, and I am that what I feel. Okay, so that's what we're up against. We have a lot of momentum because we've believed something that's not true to be ourselves for almost our whole lives. And so this process that we're in is to wake up to what's actually real and what's actually true. But nobody on this call has to believe me. You have to find out for yourself. But like I said before, I know almost everybody on this call. And I know you've already found out, so you can't bullshit me. Okay, and a few of you that I don't know, just find out for yourself. And if you get on the call a few times, then we'll all know too. So anyway, I just want you to recognize that you actually cause yourself your own suffering by personalizing thought and feeling and creating a whole story about who you think you are. And you can stop that suffering in this moment. You never actually have to suffer again if you don't want to. Now, of course, I'm not saying that, everything just goes like this, and you, all of a sudden you change this habit overnight. That's a possibility. But for most people, it's a practice and it's a process. And it doesn't mean that you're doing it more slowly. You should be doing it quicker. What life is really all about, our existence here, is to surrender to that which is and be willing and able to live and to awaken to what's true. But it's not something that we can force. It's something we have to surrender to. It's something we have to give ourselves to. And when I'm saying this, I'm just talking about maybe just giving yourself to that which you don't already know. And what you'll find out is you'll find out that you think you know quite a lot that maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know as much as you think you do. And at the same time, maybe you know who you actually really are and you know everything. But maybe you're just having trouble, actually living that. Because lots of people can have spiritual experiences. A lot of people can have the doors of perception open. A lot of people can see, oh my God, I am not my thoughts and my feelings. And then the habit to personalize thought is so strong that sooner or later, somebody will do that. And then you think you've lost what you've already found. But if you really go deeply into this, you'll recognize that who you are is always who you are, no matter what you think and what you feel, no matter how much suffering you cause yourself. You're always who you are. It's always here waiting for you. It's just a case of having a different relationship to the movement of mind and the arising of sensation and feeling. So it's super simple, and that's what makes it so challenging. Because there's no wiggle room. There's no space for you to make it complex. So as soon as you make it complex, I can guarantee it's about you and your story. when you really get simple about this, your story basically disappears. And then you actually get to a point in your life where you're not really interested in that story anymore. You're more interested in being yourself. You're more interested in being free here and now. You're more interested in finding out what that's like. And you're more interested in not knowing what the next moment's going to bring. But you're also more interested in fully engaging with life as it's happening, with all its complexity and all its craziness. So this isn't about bypassing your life. It's about fully embracing who you are so you can actually live your life. And not because it's for you, but you can actually live your life as consciousness itself for the sake of everybody else on this planet. That sounds a bit more exciting than just adding another chapter to your stupid book, doesn't it? Sorry, sometimes I kind of get like this, so I hope nobody's taking it in the wrong way. But I actually do mean it. So, okay, I think I'll just leave it at that. And then let's have some questions, because we really want to make this real. Because I think everybody on this call, understands that we make the illusion of separation and limitation, we make it real a lot of the time. And so we need to work together. We need to be able to identify this movement so that you don't feel like you're out there on your own trying to live what your deepest understanding is. And you can stop seeking for that which you've already found. You can start living that which you've already found, but in order to do that, you have to stop seeking. Because the insistence that it's not here and now is basically what ego actually is. Okay, so it's not a solid structure, it's not a boogeyman. It's just the personalization of thought and feeling that's arising in any given moment. That's all it is. Nobody has a big boogeyman on their shoulder, even though you feel like you do, talking to you all the time. I don't know, that's not such a good idea. Oh, they were really nasty to me. Ooh, Okay, so why don't we open it up for questions? And because we've got a couple of screens, I think...
Actually, yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so Laura's going to...
Just make a sign.
You're muted, Laura.
Oh. Make a sign if you want to speak.
And don't hold back. Where's Jim? Oh, hi, Jim. Nice to see you.
You. First of all, thank you so much. And one of the things that I'm recognizing is someone who's had an opportunity to listen to the truth, which is something that I see you as, and see, I hear your words and it just resonates with the truth that I've been listening to for over 40 years. And the thing that occurs to me, I just wanted to get your take on this, is as many times as I think I've heard it, it always occurs to me like I'm hearing it for the first time. And I'm not exactly sure what that's, but what it seems to resonate with, and maybe it resonates with the depth. There's a certain simplicity and a willingness just to be open and vulnerable that perhaps gets developed over the years. But there is, I think, part of it that's always something that feels brand new. And maybe that's the very nature of it. It's nothing I can hang on to, or I've heard this before, or I know that, or know this. It's just, the mind just gets, for me, it just gets kind of quiet. And there's a resonance energetically that just is present. And in that resonance, there's always a deep sense of gratitude and a recognition of the power of the collective field that contributes to that. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say. And anything you have to say about that would be?
Well, I think I could say something in different directions about it, but this thing of something always being new, because everything is arising and falling away in every single moment. The only thing that's not, the only thing that's permanent or not changing is consciousness or awareness itself. And so if if in this moment, and there is only this moment, if you're listening, in this case, to me speaking, and you're having the experience of this is always new, it's because you're actually resting in a place where you're leaning in, and you're more interested in what you don't know. You're more interested in being, of receiving, than you are in sitting back and saying, oh, I've heard this 1,000 times, I already know this. So it's not the content, it's from where you're receiving it. So if you wanted to sit, you could take the same exact talk and you could sit there and go, oh God, I've heard her say this so many times. I wish she'd say something new. I already know. And then you're just contracted and not receiving. There's no gratitude. There's no receptivity. But you chose not to do that. And so that's the whole point. When you open up, then it is going to feel like everything is new because you're actually experiencing it for the first time because it's only happening now. Everything is always new. So what you're saying is like, this is the way we can live. And not in some kind of weird spiritual way that I have to be, oh my God, everything's new. But just the realization that that actually is the truth. So I think it's perfect that you said it the way that you said it. And it really points to what's real.
Yes, I'm completely aligned with what you're saying. And
but isn't but I just want to say, Jim, just for everybody else too, isn't it interesting? You see that you made a choice on from where you wanted to listen. And that's what everybody does. So when anybody's home alone, or when you're in a conversation with your partner or your business partner driving you crazy or whatever, and thoughts are arising and you're contracting around those thoughts, you see the movement to contract is not a problem, but what are you going to do? From where are you going to rest? You see, and nobody is ever stuck, because it might be that you're just like what Jim was saying, his mind was just very still. That might be the case. Or everything is screaming inside of you. But you see, it doesn't matter if everything is screaming inside of you. It only matters if you are going to take the position, you know, of I have a big problem now, or are you going to take the position of like, wow, look at that. I'm watching this whole story, this whole contraction arise in my awareness right now. And every person on this call has the capacity to decide how they relate to the movement of their own mind, what they perceive to be the attack of others. But it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing to you. It's basically translated in somebody does something to you, you have a thought about it, and you personalize that thought. And all of that is happening right now. And everybody can choose how they want to relate to it. And that's the practice.
Yes, and something you said earlier comes back to me, is that when we recognize that we have this freedom, we recognize that we're not a victim of the circumstance. That is actually, when we see that I'm a victim of the circumstance and that contraction, we're choosing that. And sometimes that's very challenging to see.
Yeah, but you can usually physically feel it because you feel physically contracted. And in victimization is something that, if you look at it, it's very obvious, because the victim position means somebody or something is doing something to me. Right. So you've already created an other and a you, and you've already created separation. Instead of just, wow, look, something's arising, something's happening. You see, so that's where the separation comes in. As soon as, if you're victimized, that is the definition of separation, because you're convinced that there is something outside of you that's causing you all your suffering, instead of just realizing the insistence that there's something outside of you causing you all your suffering is what's causing your suffering. And of course, we have things in life where people aren't pleasant or it doesn't go the way we want it to go. But can we open up to new possibilities? Can we see everything that happens in our life from a different perspective? That's the point. And everybody can do it, but we all have to learn about this. We have to be able to recognize it for ourselves, because we're so convinced that what we think and what we feel is actually who we are. I think everybody, however many people I can see, do you guys recognize what I'm saying? Yes? Okay, you see, so we're all the same. We're all in it together. We're all in the same boat. We're awakened to something. Wow, that was good. The light just came back on when I said awakened. I'm sure that means something about me, Okay, but do you get what I'm saying? It's like we're all in the same boat, because we're all conditioned human beings. I can say almost everybody, but I don't know a few people on the call. But I'm going to say everybody has seen something beyond the conditioned mind. Okay? So we're all a group of people who have seen something beyond the conditioned mind that we recognize to be ourselves, and we all still have a habit of personalizing thought and feeling, and we all make ourselves suffer, and then sometimes we suffer a lot and we decide to do something different. Sometimes we catch on quicker, but the whole point is like, don't make your story personal, because everybody has the same habit. Everybody is awakening to the same thing. See, we're all in it together. There is no separation here. You know, but if you cut yourselves off and you think you have to do it on your own, or you're going to be ashamed because, oh my God, you personalized a thought, you know, that's just the ego coming in and trying to convince you that you're alone when you're not. So are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you willing to be open? Are you willing to be with other people? Are you willing to be honest? Are you willing to care enough to not be afraid to be vulnerable? Are you willing to be honest enough and just say, I'm afraid to be vulnerable? You see, nobody's stuck. You can't be stuck in this. Okay. Thanks, Jim. So if you have a question and you're afraid, you're making ego real and you're personalizing a thought in this very moment. Just so you know. See, this is why the pressure's on. You see, because you're sitting there going, oh my God, I really want to say something, but I'm afraid. Now she just called me out. Oh shit. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stay with the fear, or are you going to actually raise your hand and say, I have a question? Even if it's a stupid question, it's good because it's a question. I'm looking at all you guys on the couch at Avidanja, all the clinic people. See, we've got this bone and body clinic going on right now, and I'm kind of the organizer person running around trying to keep everybody in the right place and doing the right things and stuff. And we all stretch together, and we're all physically in pain some of the time. So I'm looking at these guys, and it's kind of an interesting experience to me because they know me as the person who's running around registering everybody, and now they're on a webinar, and here I'm somebody else. Isn't that weird? I think that's weird. Oh, Lucia's going to jump in. Hello.
Hi. Actually, it's not me. It's him.
It's who?
Eric.
Eric.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, today I had like a...
Can you lean a little closer to the microphone because I can't really hear you?
Yeah, today I have a conversation with in Ria.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And we're talking about, well, if you have trauma, like a big trauma experience on your child.
Uh-huh. Can everybody hear him?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't very well, so can you speak up a little bit more?
Okay.
I heard you about the trauma.
Okay, and you know that those trauma live in your body. Sometimes it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. And you know, stuff can trigger it, and then anything can trigger, like look like the past experience. So you can make yourself believe it doesn't exist, but it's there. It's in your body, you know?
Right. But I'm not saying that your experience doesn't exist, because if there's something arising, and let's say trauma, the memory of trauma does stay in the body. And then when that is released, that is real. The trauma that's arising in your experience in that moment is actually happening. So I'm not denying that it's happening, but what I'm saying is, can you recognize it as something old that's being released from the body and not continue to identify with it in a way where you still think it's something that's holding you back or it's something you have to get over? You see, because if you go beyond the conditioned mind and you recognize that which is prior to thought or feeling, you recognize it's also who you are is also prior to trauma. And that means that nothing in this world has ever been, who you actually really are as consciousness itself has never been wounded or traumatized. Now, Eric has lived in this world, and everybody else on this call, has had stuff happen to them. Some people have had terrible things. Some people have had less terrible things. So we all have some form of trauma that we've lived through. Okay? But then you have to decide, do you want that trauma to define who you are now that it's becoming conscious to you? Because before, when it's in the body, you just might be reacting to it, but you don't really understand it. But then when it starts to release, then you can sit there and you can say, wow, look at that. I can look at this trauma that's arising now. Here I am, and however old you are. I can look at this childhood trauma that's arising, but I am looking at it with a different understanding. I don't need to deny it. I can feel the pain of it, but I don't have to make it into a story that's going to continue in your lifetime. It's still going to be part of your human experience, but it doesn't have to define who you are, because who you are is prior to all of it. So you have to be able to hold an absolute view of you are that which is prior to anything that's ever happened in time. And at the same time, you don't deny your relative experience as a human being who's gone through stuff. Yeah. But most of the time what we do is we just contract around the trauma and we identify with that, and we cut ourselves off from this deeper, more absolute truth of who we are. Okay? And if you look at it in this moment, if that's what your experience is, you see this trauma gives you first of all, it's releasing, and it's giving you an opportunity to be able to awaken to something that's prior to the trauma. You see, the reason it's arising is because you're more open. If you were not open, you wouldn't be recognizing this trauma as it's arising. You'd still have it very stuffed down and very,
It won't heal the trauma, just kind of disconnecting yourself from your trauma, but it doesn't heal it. So you need to find a way to heal your trauma. So
no, but you don't have to heal. What I'm saying to you though is you don't have to heal it. What actually heals trauma is not trying to fix it. It's just accepting it for what it is. You accept fully that it happened. You accept the pain that has occurred because of it. But what you don't do, the real healing, is that you also accept in that moment that you are prior to all of it. You have to always have that in the picture. Otherwise, it's going to be a continuous experience of thinking that I will only be free. I will only be a free human being when I've actually healed all my trauma. And what I'm saying to you is you heal the trauma in the moment that you accept it fully, because there is only this moment.
Yeah, you can accept it then when you accept it. Yeah, you can accept it, but after accepting it, you can work on it, find a way to release those trauma anyway, or lightening the trauma like that doesn't affect your life all the time.
Have you ever noticed though, sometimes, this is a question that a lot of people ask, so this, I appreciate you bringing it up. But you see, you have to realize that there's moments that you're aware of trauma and there's moments that you're not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in the moments that you're not, and let's just say you find yourself happy and content.
Mhm.
Is there anything to heal in that moment?
No, but if it trigger it, something trigger it,
No,
then
no, but just stay with me, because I'm not denying that what you're saying is your experience, because I've had the same experience myself.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is there is only this moment now. There's not the next moment, and there's not the future where you need to heal yourself. In the moment that you are with the trauma that's arising, and you don't try to make it, you don't personalize it in a way, or you attach to it, but
Yeah.
you don't push it away, but you don't bring it towards you. You completely accept it. You see, in that moment, you are not creating more of the story. You're transcending the story.
Mhm.
You see, you're transcending the trauma.
That moment, yeah. But
No, but just because the trauma arises in the next moment, you can do the same thing.
huh?
So that's where your choice comes in, is because you see, if you're saying, so you were with me in the fact that when the trauma's arising and you accept it, then you transcend it in that moment. But see, then if you can transcend it in that moment or this moment, then you can transcend it in every moment, because it's your choice what your relationship to the trauma is. And I'm not talking about bypassing it, but what I'm also not talking, what I'm saying is that you don't need to, if you continue to make it a problem that you have to overcome, then you are going to be dealing with it forever. But if you look at your own experience, and in the moment that you decide to just accept it and not avoid it, but not make it into a story, in that moment you transcend it, and you can do that in every moment. It doesn't, and so that's what we have to actually embrace. That's the power that empowers us, because if it's my choice how I relate to anything in particular, if it's my choice how I relate to my trauma, then that means, and I've already recognized in my own experience, that I can just accept it and something else happens. If I know that in my own experience, and it sounds like you do, you see, then don't argue for a limitation thinking that it's not going to be that way again. Because in the moment that you actually do that, you are liberated from that trauma. You're liberated from your story, and you're not denying the story, but you're resting in that which is prior to the story. So it's very empowering, but it's very challenging, because, I have a history of trauma too. So I'm not talking just in theory here. But what I know is that, what happened to me happened to me. The process that I went through. But I know now that it's always going to be part of my story, but it doesn't define me in a negative way. The reason it defines me is because I know what it's like on the other side of trauma. So in a certain way, that trauma is still defining me, but it's not ruling, it's not limiting me, and it's not telling me who I am.
Yeah.
So we can, if you want, since we're going to be at the clinic together tomorrow again, we can talk about this some more if you want.
Of course.
Of course. Okay, good. If we're both physically able. Okay, cool. But I appreciate you bringing it up. So, yeah, I hope that helped. I don't know if it helped at all.
Well, I kind of know what you said. I know that, but
Yeah.
but it's those.
Okay, but the challenge is, Eric, if you know it, you see, then you have to do it.
Like mid-stage for the rest of my life and say but come out of the cave, you go back to see your parents, then you try to be separate from your trauma. They're gonna trigger something, and you have to deal with it. You can the trauma and you. For me, it's like you need to go in the shadow. You need to go. If you're sad, be in there, and dig in that sorrow and that. It's you need the shadow to see the light. So
Yeah, but you can't forget about the light, because a lot of people can get very fascinated with the shadow, but they forget about the light. So what this is really all about is, you know, there's a moment that, you know, that's all part of your process. But if you actually, you go home and your parents are your parents because they're always your parents.
yeah.
But you see, in every moment, you still get to decide how you relate to it. And so it's not a problem that things arise. It's not a problem. It's basically you know, it's a challenge. It's a moment to say, how are you going to relate to this? And we're talking about trauma now, but we can widen it out, because we can, if you just look at your day to day, if anybody just looks at their day to day, I'm sure you had lots of thoughts and
yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
situations that you basically had the opportunity to have a liberated relationship to your experience, and maybe you did and maybe you didn't. And then you can look and you can say, wow, when I didn't have a liberated relationship to my experience, meaning I wasn't personalizing it, when I didn't personalize, then I didn't suffer. But if I personalized it and I got all wrapped up in it and I had to figure everything out, instead of just like surrendering to the situation, surrendering to letting it go, letting it be there, then you'll find that you did suffer if you resisted that. So what I'm talking about this from a spiritual context. I'm not talking about it from a therapeutic context.
Mm-hmm.
Because a therapeutic context, a lot of the time, is that you have to go through all of your stuff and one day you'll be free. And the spiritual context I'm talking about is that you are always already free, and there's times you're going to have to deal with your stuff. But it doesn't mean while you're dealing with your stuff that you're not always already free. That's the difference. And, you know, sometimes we have to go through the therapeutic approach. But then there's a time that we have to let go of that therapeutic approach, because we can, you know, we can end up being very attached to having to get over our trauma. So it's challenging. It's challenging. But it's just one moment at a time. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for bringing it up.
Well, thank you. We'll talk about it tomorrow again.
We'll talk about it tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Francis, is she on? I have to find you on my screen first, Francis, see if I can see. Oh, there you are. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for this beautiful conversation. I just wanted to help me to pull out a thread that I feel is kind of here between what Jim was bringing and what Eric was bringing, because I was noticing just this kind of amazing, the way in which Jim laid the foundation and then Eric's conversation was pulling it out. So you said something to Jim about I think you used the word mutuality or reciprocity.
Uh-huh.
You know, that Jim came to the conversation and he was in this place of what felt to me like a sort of leaning forward, rather than what I noticed in myself, you know, the kind of voice of, oh, you know, is this going to be something new? You know, all that kind of chatter that goes on. And then I was noticing that there's that sort of melting that happens. And then when Eric was talking, I was thinking, it's very like what Jim was bringing. And it's something, there's something in that I'd like you to pull the thread out for me. And it's something around the difference between coming as a one and speaking to another one, rather than being in some relationship of mutuality.
Well, both are actually happening, because, you know, we are all one consciousness. There's only one consciousness looking through my eyes and one consciousness looking through your eyes. Right. So in that sense, there's only one consciousness animating everybody that's on this call and animating everything. Just like when we did the meditation, you know, it's not like we're all sitting here breathing. It's like something is actually breathing us, right? So there's one thing going on, but there's all these many different modifications of that one. Okay, so you have a different history than I do. You might think about things differently than I do. So it's not a case of I'm trying to come here as one or you're trying to come here as one. But if we come together and we're more interested in what we don't know instead of what we already know, if we come together and we're not imposing a separate, any kind of separation between us, and that separation in a conversation can look like, I already know. Okay, so like if you brought something to me and I'm sitting there go, okay, I already know what it is, and this is what it is, X, Y, Z, and this is what it is, and come on, Francis, just get on board, you know? And you were like going, well, no, I think this, and I'm completely convinced that this is the way. And then we just have two egos that are just basically bouncing off of each other. And there's still two different modifications of that one consciousness, but they're two unconscious modifications of that one consciousness. So when you start become conscious that there is only one, but there's all these different manifestations of that one, you know, and we're both conditioned human beings, but we know we're both conditioned human beings, and we're more interested in coming together than we are in being right. We're more interested in in being together than we are in just holding on to our position. I may have a different view than you have, but you see, we don't have to divide just because we have a different view. So it's a case of recognizing the deep spiritual truth that we're always already together. That's the truth. So even if you come into a conversation and there's conflict between you and someone else, you see, if you never let go of this spiritual truth that we are always already together, you can have a lot of friction in a conversation, but you don't divide. You don't take a position of separation. You may take a strong position that you think something is true, but you don't have to take a position of separation. You can have a different view than I have, but if we don't divide, what normally happens in conflict, if the two parties don't divide, is you end up transcending what the conflict was about, and you end up going much deeper into something else, and something else opens up that's far beyond what the original conflict was about. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but you don't, it's resting in actually what you know to be true. So if you know to be true in your own experience that there is only one consciousness, and we're both that, I am that, and you are that, then we can do anything. We can have conflict, we can have no conflict. But if I'm convinced I'm separate from you, how I relate to you is going to be drastically different.
Right, which is interesting because what I noticed, and I'm sure my experience is not unique, but it's like that I can come into a conversation where I'm maybe resting in that, and then as the conversation progresses, particularly if it's a heated conversation and I'm agreeing with people, particularly the political situation we've got in the UK at the moment that's very activated, it's easy to somehow get pulled into a current of acting as if we're separate.
Right.
And I notice that and I go, oh gosh, I was doing that, and then I try to come back to the the place where I am aware that there's no separation. So yeah, it's helpful to maybe if you could just say something around that, how that coming back to that, which isn't.
Well, I think there's two ways to answer that question. One is that we live in a very egoic motivated world, and and so there's an insistence that I'm separate. And like I was saying earlier, that when we have an identity, we have a self-image. And as soon as I have a particular self-image that I am a good person, I am politically correct, I am whatever, as soon as I have a self-image that says I am this, then all of a sudden I have something to protect and I have something to prove. And who am I going to protect it from? You. Who am I going to prove it to? You. So you are not a person that's standing in front of me. You are the object that the egoic habit in me needs to be fed. So if I need to prove that I'm a good person and you're the person who's standing in front of me, then I need you. I'm using you to reflect back to me I'm a good person. And if you don't do that, then I'm going to be angry with you because you're not giving me what I need. Okay? So that's the world we live in. And what I'm saying is, can we actually go deep enough and beyond all of this, either through, like I said, grace or just our own intention and determination? Can we let go of all that, and can we recognize? And it's a recognition. It's not just a knowing intellectually. It's a recognition that I know who I am, and I know that I am not that person who needs something from another. I'm not the person who needs to have affirmation, that needs this. Because when I let go of all of that persona and all those self-images, what you'll find is that there's nothing missing. And if everybody just thinks about their deepest spiritual experience, when the doors of perception open and everything falls away, just look and see for yourself, because in that moment you'll recognize nothing is missing. And if nothing is missing, it means I don't need anything to fulfill who I am. I don't need to use any other people. I don't need to use animals. I don't need any constant reflection to tell me I'm okay, because I'm resting in that which is always already okay. You see, and then you bring that to the table. So if, and look, this is the process. So you can know this very, very deeply and still get caught up in it, in the heat of the moment. But when you recognize that you are contracted and you recognize you're polarized, in that moment, you can just take a deep breath. And you can just, okay, whew. And you're not trying to convince yourself intellectually. You're not trying to create any kind of feeling experience to tell you this is true. You just recognize that you've moved away from what you know to be true. And you're shifting your attention back to what you know to be true. And your internal experience may still be completely chaotic. But you see, it doesn't matter, because you're actually, your perception of your experience is completely different when you come back to that which doesn't need anything. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And I there's something in there. I'm recognizing when you said that, there's some part of me that still thinks that feeling tells me something important. And which I'm just noticing that is a really useful place for me to do some inquiry for myself into.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say that, well, if I'm not attached to my feelings, then I won't know how to operate. But see, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that feelings are irrelevant.
Mm.
I'm just saying that if a feeling arises, can we just not make it part of our story?
Right. Yeah.
Can we just go, oh my God, I'm really just very sad right now.
Yeah.
But you see, when we make it part of our story, let's say about the political situation, you can be very upset and very sad about it. But if you don't make it part of your story, you'll just recognize you're sad. And I guarantee, if you recognize in a situation like that, if you recognize you're sad about something and you let yourself be with it, you see, you will actually understand more about the situation. And you'll be able to see a bigger perspective of that situation if you're not denying that sadness or you're pushing it away. You see, and it's only ego that wants to push it away and control it. It's the fear of feeling pain. What's wrong with pain? What's wrong with it? Where did we get an idea that pain is something we should avoid? Where is it that we should avoid sadness? We're very good at avoiding happiness. Where did that idea come from? Right? So this is what we want to start looking at and going, God, I think I know everything about everything. I know pain is bad. I know happiness is good, but I avoid both of them. What in the hell's going on here? So that's the whole thing about acceptance. Can we just actually be with what is and allow ourselves to not worry that we won't be functional if we're not making our feelings mean something about us? You see, because you will be absolutely functional and you will feel more. But you see, you'll be able to respond with in a completely different way if you're not thinking that you have to feel something or a feeling is going to help you. Maybe a feeling will help you, but let go of the idea that you need it.
Right.
You see, that's the thing. Because, yeah, if a feeling comes and it helps you, fantastic. Yeah. But don't make it part of your story. And part of the story is I need I feel this part of me resist letting go of feeling. Okay, so that was just something arose in your awareness. And then what it kind of said, you know, what it told you was that you're attached to not knowing. I mean, you're attached in having to know.
Right.
Because what if you don't know anything? I mean, just think about it. What would it be like? You know, this is for everybody. Would it be like to have nothing, know nothing, and be nobody? And it doesn't mean everybody should give away all their money, you know, and live in a cave or something. It does. But what would it mean, especially the know nothing? Because everybody thinks they know everything. You know, and if we just let go of the need to know, we will know more than we ever can imagine, but it won't be part of our story. And we'll be free from the need to know. We'll transcend that need to know, and we'll be interested in knowing and knowing and knowing. Just because we let go of the need to know doesn't mean we just turn into a big vegetable or something. You know, enlightened vegetable. Everybody's like, oh my God, if I let go of control, I'll just be an enlightened vegetable. You know? You know, and so I think everybody should try it and see what happens. You know, but I don't think that, you know, if you look at Ramana Maharshi or you look at some of the great, you know, enlightened human beings, they were engaged, they were compassionate, they felt pain, they felt happiness, they felt everything. They weren't disconnected just because they were willing to not, you know, to let go of the need to know. They were more alive. You see, so we want to, that's it. It's letting go of the need to know. It doesn't mean that we just want to be stupid. It means we want to be fully, you know, capable of responding. But these are big things I'm talking about, you know, and it's not like everybody's need to know. You can recognize the truth in what I'm saying, but it doesn't mean that tomorrow or 5 minutes, you know, from now, that the need to know is not going to arise in your awareness. But even if there's the need to know, you know, like, I really have to know this, I just need to know, I'm afraid to not know. Even if that starts to shake your core, you know, you don't have to do anything with it. You can just let it be there. So the presence of egoic habits is not a problem. It's only when you think they're real and they mean something about you. When I say real, it doesn't mean that they're not arising in the moment. It doesn't mean that they're not happening in that moment. But is it true? So when I say how real is it, the question is how true is it? You know, an ego can seem real to us, but then if you in your own experience know that you are not that because you understood that already, then it's in that moment that you can decide, am I going to go with my deepest understanding of what's true, or am I going to convince myself that this egoic habit that's arising in my awareness is actually real? Because it's not real if 1 minute it's there and 1 minute it's gone. It's not solid. So everybody just, you know, everybody's got to do the work in order to fight your way out of this belief. And when I say fight your way out, what that looks like is in every moment, you always go back to your deepest understanding. And if your deepest understanding, you don't know that who you are beyond the conditioned mind yet, then you need to apply yourself through meditation, or you know, meditation is probably the best, but it can happen at any time. And then give yourself to it, and and see what happens. And, and I totally recommend doing it with other people, because it's not just about getting over the ego, getting over the illusion of ego. When you transcend ego as an individual, it's amazing in that moment. But when you transcend ego in a collective, then something really starts to happen that goes far beyond anything that you could imagine just as an individual. And that, just to be quite honest, that is what is happening. It's starting to happen in this project, the Awaken Life Project. It's happening on public retreats. It's happening in our committed Sangha. And every single person who has experienced it through the context that we're presenting, and I'm not saying it's the only context, but every single person will tell you that it's not just something that is always bliss and easy. People have to make effort. You have to make effort. You have to be willing to let the egoic habits within you burn. You have to be willing to stay in the pot and let and let yourself be cooked by consciousness itself. And if everybody stays in the pot together, you see something amazing really comes forward. But it's not because it was just all love and light and bliss. It was love, light, and bliss, but it was love, light, and bliss in the form of challenge, intensity, effort. But you see, it's all love, light, and bliss in the end. And that's what we don't recognize. But it is all love, light, and bliss. There isn't anything that's happening to any single person on this call that is not love, light, and bliss. It just doesn't feel the way that you want it most of the time. So there you go. It's all in your hands, you guys. And everybody makes mistakes. And there's plenty of room for mistakes, but there's no room for conscious indulgence. So if that's what you're doing, stop it. Because we all need to support each other in this. And if we want to change the world, we have to bring more consciousness into this world. And it comes through each individual's choice in every moment. And so if you know it and you recognize that you're contracting, then you do something different. And all that means is you take a breath. And as soon as you take a breath, you're already on the other side of it to some degree. Maybe you have to take 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Maybe you have to just go, excuse me, I'll be with you in a moment, and walk away for 5 minutes and start hyperventilating. I don't know, whatever you have to do. But you can do it. Funny, I don't feel so tired anymore. How did that happen? I don't know. So I know a lot of you guys on the call tonight, you've been recently, like I said, on the 10-day retreat, or you've been on a retreat here, in the spring or whenever. And I think all of you have probably struggled at one time or another, or consistently and dug yourself out of it or whatever. But just realize that, as long as you stay in the pot, as long as you keep giving yourself, you see something else happens. And everybody on this call, I'm hoping, just for the people I can see, maybe you got on this call and you felt heavy and contracted or whatever. But I hope that now you're giving yourself to what I'm saying, and you can see that ego is not real. Because if you're experiencing contentment or happiness or lightness of being right now in a way that you weren't the last time you thought you had a big problem, you see, just realize that you made a choice to be on this webinar. You gave yourself to listening to this, and maybe you were in and out and you thought, oh, here she goes again. But, just realize, just keep engaging, keep giving yourself, keep connecting. Don't hold yourself separate. Everybody needs everybody in order to be able to live this. You can't do it on your own. I don't care who you are. And you can prove me wrong if you want. See, either way I win. Because if you don't live it on your, if you don't try to maintain separation and try to do it on your own, I win. And if you do it on your own and you're enlightened and you're transcending ego, I still win. Isn't that cool? And we all win. But it's so much more fun when we do it together. Okay, so I'm always very good about keeping the time. But I've really enjoyed being with everybody, and it's very good to see some faces I haven't seen for a while. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, everyone.
I want to give you guys all a big hug.
Before we go, got to do my bit. I just want to mention a couple of retreats that are coming up. One is in 10 days. It's a meditation retreat here at Quinta de Miserella from the 13th to the 15th with Pete. And I'll send you details of everything I speak about now tomorrow in an email, so don't worry if you I won't remember. So that's, yeah, in 10 days time there's a weekend retreat, which is a really fantastic way to immerse yourself a bit deeper in the meditation and the teachings. And then at New Year, which I highly recommend, Cynthia is doing a 7-day retreat. So that's from the 27th of January till the 27th of December till the 3rd of January. And I did that one last year with Cynthia, and it was amazing. Really great way to end the new year, end one year and start the new one. So I will send you details of that tomorrow, and I'll also send you details of how to donate for the webinar if you wish to do so. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, and don't forget the next webinar. And if any of you on this call have any subjects you want me to talk about, just send an email, because I'm open. All right. So I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Bye. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Ariana, good to see you. And Francis, thanks for the conversation. Good to see you, Carol.
Hi. Good to see you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Natasha.
Hello.
Jana.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
This is the fun part. I love this part. Oh, Rosalia, your camera wasn't on, but I'll see you tomorrow. Don't be late
Yes.
for your appointment.
No, I'm not. Thank you. See you
Okay,
tomorrow.
Wow, look at the Quinta people all together there.
Yeah.
Oh, there you guys are. You've been in the dark.
Oh, we on the big screen.
Oh, there's Abhidanja. Hi, you guys. Sarah, I don't know you, but hello. Nice to see you. And Alexandra, it's so good to see you on the call.
Yeah, who you?
See you.
Oh.
JP, you look funny. JP.
Oh, it's just.
Hi, Margaret Santiago. Hello. Oh, Claudia. I got your email. I'm sorry, but come and see us anyway sometime soon.
Hey.
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 You know, Annabella looks different, doesn't she?
Where is she?
Oh, she just disappeared. All right. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Oh, I'm Rebecca. Cool. Hi. Are you in the land of Ireland with no problem? Very good to hear. And Raquel and David. Hi. Just up the hill from us. How are we going to do this?
You have to be the last one.
Hey, Kate. It's been a long time. Good to see you.
Hey, hello.
Hello.
I was trying to keep awake.
That's okay. You can watch the recording if you fell asleep.
Yeah. Nice to see you all.
I won't take it personally.
Okay.
Whose head is that at Abidanja? Maybe we should turn the recording off now.
Yeah.
Is it